Hi, this is Erica Johnson. Welcome to another video about clinical research. Today I want to talk to those of you. I've a member of a couple of different Facebook pages and such, and there was a question that's been coming up a lot lately. How do you make the transition from being a clinical research coordinator to being a monitor? So I want to just give you a very, very general overview. If you'd like, if I don't answer all of your questions, please leave the question in the comments, or and I'd be glad to try to give you some more detail. But I want to give a very general idea to you. So from moving to from being a site level clinical research coordinator to a monitor. So what we know about coordinators is that you guys are very time oriented and highly organized, that you have to be to do your job. Many coordinators, when I go to sites, I encounter coordinators who are juggling 5 or 6 studies, if not more, and seeing the patients, doing the data entry, and also doing a lot of the regulatory, if not all of the regulatory. So it's very clear that if you're doing that job, you are a highly organized person. So when I made the transition, and I actually went from being a site manager to the monitoring, but in the particular dynamic that I was in, I still was doing a lot of clinical research coordinator task at this particular site. So the thing that if I had to sum it up in one sentence to you is that your time management and organization has to just be magnified. Like, I consider myself to be pretty organized, like almost to a fault in terms of like sometimes getting obsessed with like color coordinating. Like, blue is for this, red is for that, and wanting the file folders to be the same size. And I can spend hours organizing things and putting them in alphabetical order, and it just doesn't feel like work. It's like the time just goes by. I enjoy it. It's something that I enjoy doing. But when you begin to monitor, you're no longer in your nice little organized space for most of the week. You have to learn how to be organized mobily, and that is an adjustment. You know, when you have your file folders and your computer and you know where everything is, and you have this method set up and you have this routine set up, it's pretty easy to be your normal, happy, organized time management self. But now take that and put it on the road. Where you don't always have access to things that you're used to having in your office. Scanners, when you're on the road, you don't always have access to a scanner, so you're going to have to make copies of things and wait to scan them in when you get back to the office. You always sometimes don't even have access to copy machines or open access to copy machines. You have to have someone else make copies for you. So that is the thing that I would say to you. Prepare yourself, especially if you're just a tiny bit OCD. You're gonna have to make adjustments to your personality and to the way that you like to do things, and it's not impossible. You're just gonna have to make those adjustments. If you're someone who's not flexible, um, you're gonna have to work on being flexible because flight delays happen. All I have heard all kinds of stories. People get to hotels, they have a reservation, and the hotel is sold out anyway, and their room was given away, and they had to go somewhere. They've gotten to the car rental, and there's no cars left. Your flight gets delayed, your flight gets canceled. The site calls and leaves you a message when you're on the plane telling you, oh, the doctor had to leave the country and we have to cancel the visit for tomorrow. I mean, all kinds of, you would not believe the things that monitors encounter on the road. And then, you're on the road, you're on site, you're monitoring, but you still have in-house duties that you have to be, responsible for, timesheets, um, expense reports, you're monitoring, and there's 7 emails flying in that need your attention right away. I mean, it's just you've really got to look past how organized you are and time oriented you are, and say, how can I do better and how can I make this mobile? It also, I would say, when I've worked with some really excellent coordinators and dedicated people who came in on Saturday mornings, people who came in on holidays, people who stayed late to meet deadlines and to meet the study visit window in the protocol. And so just, I know that coordinators tend to be really dedicated people. The first thing you've got to realize is that you're going to have less patient contact, way less, like almost zero as a monitor. So if patient contact is really important to you, then please think about, the transition, and think about that component. Secondly, um, because there is travel involved and because there's a lot of responsibilities involved and you're answering to multiple project managers, not just one PI or two PIs like you may be used to at your site, sometimes there's the need to draw the line in the sand more than when you were on the site level. And that just means being responsible for your own health and your own mental health and physical health and looking at your calendar. Meeting, you want to meet deadlines, you want to meet you want your, if you're an independent contractor, if you work for a CRO or for a pharmaceutical company, you want to shed them in the best light at all times and be professional and meet deadlines as best as you can, but you have to be realistic and in the very first year I was traveling, I made some really rookie mistakes trying to do that. Like, yeah, I can do a visit in New York on Monday and do a visit in New Mexico on Tuesday. Well, that's just not, that just wasn't smart. I mean, that's halfway across the country. If I had, thought about it, I would have spaced it out a little bit better and said, well, okay, in between New York and New Mexico, is there some place that I can do on Tuesday and then get to New Mexico by Wednesday or Thursday? That way I'm making the best use of my time and following a linear flight path across the country. So that's just something to consider. You really got to um, be a person who doesn't make rash, quick decisions, but thinks through what you're doing and thinks through what needs to be done, um, and is just conscious of how this is going to impact you, on physically, mentally, emotionally, on top of all the other things. So that to me, those are the two things that you really have to consider: the time management organization component, and then the component of just you're much more responsible now for your time and how you spend it and the quality of your life as you're working. When you have that office job, or even if you work from home every day and it's a set 9 to 5, your responsibility level is really just more like, you know, getting tasks done on time and managing that time. But when you are put in a situation where you're basically at work almost, all day and all night because you can't really think of the 9 to 5 anymore. It's much more of just a block of time. You're responsible for the work, but you're also responsible for the quality of your life in that time period. So those are the two major things to consider because if the tactical part of this is, as a coordinator, you're aware of GCP. You may not pull it out and quote it as often, because on the site level, you really are focused on the subjects and doing things as best you can according to the protocol. But, if something doesn't get done for, it's a millisecond off, as long as you're focused on the patient's safety and you're focused on getting the patient in and getting them out comfortably, that's your focus. So, you know, being a monitor is slightly different in that you don't have that patient contact, but you know, you have that access to the GCP, to the FDA regulations, to the regulatory part. It's much more in the front of your brain. As a coordinator, you're focusing on the action. And as the monitor, you're focusing on the action after the fact and how was it done and how was it documented. So that's not, to me, that's not the major change for the coordinator, because you already function in terms of regulations and rules and protocol, and you don't want to make a deviation, you don't want to make a violation, so you're cognizant of all those things. You may not quote them from the top of your head, especially when it comes to regulatory things, but you're aware of them. So that's not going to be a hard transition, but I think the time management component and the just, it's really very much like going from high school to college. That is the perfect example, because in high school, they give you deadlines. The teachers give you homework. They give you deadlines. They check in with you on projects. Well, how's it coming? And give me a progress report halfway through. And somebody's always watching you. Your parents, are like monitoring when you go out and what you're doing. So then you get to college, and suddenly not only are you responsible for your own time, nobody's watching over your shoulder, making sure you get up on time, making sure you don't go out too late or come home too late. But now the teachers are not like giving you, kind of patting you on the shoulder and guiding you every step of the way. It's like, hey, first day of class, you've got a project due on the last day of class, and it's like 75% of your grade. And I'm not, they're not going to ask you for updates. They're not going to ask you for a draft or anything. You just got to turn that thing in on the last day. Well, that's very much like transitioning from being a study coordinator to being a monitor. It's like the monitor is like the parent that comes in and says, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you get this done? Did you follow this procedure? And, so you've got that person nudging you along with all the other people, the schedulers and the infusion nurses and whatever else is involved, kind of nudging you along the process of what's going on. And, and the PI is kind of there to tell you overall what's going on. But as a monitor, you're that person now. So, and you've got to manage your time. So, I mean, I know that's not technical, but really, as someone who made the transition and who's talked to a lot of people, you've got the technical part down. If you're a coordinator, you've got the technical part. It really is about, if you're someone who's not organized, you're gonna have, a little bit more of a struggle. If you're someone who's already organized and time oriented, you're just gonna have to max out on those abilities, and you've got it in you to do it. So just finding creative ways, but really it's focusing on the personal part, the personal care, because if you don't feel well, if you're tired, if you're not working optimally, then you're not going to do an optimal job, and you're not going to give the site your best, and it happens. We all have bad days. I, am a little congested now. It's freezing all over the country. It was very cold down here in the South, and so I was not mentally prepared to be cold all over the holiday, and ended up getting a little under the weather. It happens. You'll have flight delays. You'll have bad weeks where just everything just seems to be pulling at you, and you won't give your best performance, but you'll bounce back from that. But what you want to avoid is just a constant ball spiral of just not doing your best and not giving your best because you're not prepared and you're not thinking like someone who's responsible for all their time. So that would be the thing that I would say to those of you who are making the consideration to move from a coordinator to a monitor. Just on the real here, it might seem exciting and glamorous, and I get to travel, but push that to the side and consider that you really have to be responsible for your time, and you have to amp up your organization and your time management skills, and you have to really think about, am I okay with not seeing patients and not having that patient contact? Am I okay with not having a lot of contact in general? You're at a site for 8 hours. Most of the time, you coordinators, you've got work to do. You don't sit there with your monitor and hold their hand. You meet with them once or twice throughout the visit, and you keep it moving. And you know, hopefully you're not in such a bad place where you need a lot of help co-monitoring. So you're going to be traveling by yourself, different place every day, maybe every other day, every week, definitely. And so it's just something that you need to consider. But it's a great job. It's part of advancing your career in clinical research. Um, but it's just some real things that you have to think about. So if I haven't answered any burning question that you have about making that transition, um, please leave a question in the comments. Or give a thumbs up if you found this helpful. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks.